Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. Well, it's not happy in Buffalo, but we'll ignore that. I'm sure Russ is going to talk something about that or baseball, but go ahead, Russ, with the pre-show.
Yeah, I'll go with baseball. Why not? Take baseball for 200. I want to congratulate the Mets for hiring the next Stump Merrill. They did great. It's always good to go from rookie ball right to the majors, as far as managing. I understand it worked out 43 years ago for Davey Johnson. I get it. And ever since then, it hasn't worked for the Mets. But this is a good formula for David Stearns to go with. The fans are certainly happy, and I follow suit with them. I look at this and I say, sure, the guy could work out. Yeah, okay. I mean, he could work out as well as Mickey Callaway, who was a manager, or it could work out as well as Luis Rojas, who wasn't good at anything. So I've seen enough of this to know that they panicked. That's what happened. Because here's what really could have happened and probably should have happened. So when they couldn't get counsel and then they saw that some other jobs were falling, they quickly went and they got Mendoza. Mm-hmm. But if they'd have waited 10 minutes, David Ross was cut loose. And they could have gotten David Ross, but they didn't. So
do you think David Ross, because if I remember correctly, he went from being a player to the Cubs manager, right? He was a catcher. He was on the 2018 the Cubs championship team, and I think he went right from being a player right to being a manager.
He's made it to the playoffs. He learned under Joe Madden. I don't want to upset you, Mike, or say anything bad about the Yankees. But learning under Joe Madden and learning under Aaron Boone, two different things.
Yeah, but you saying something about bad about the Yankees is like me somebody saying something.
So tell me how great Aaron Boone is.
I don't think Aaron Boone is the problem with the New York Yankees, Russ.
So he's good. So you'll keep him there another 10 years.
Yeah, yes, because I think the problem with the New York Yankees is a crappy roster and bad decisions by Brian Cashman, not Aaron Boone.
Dennis, your thoughts?
I mean, I think you can go both ways. I mean, Cashman's not put together a great flexible roster, but Boone's decision making at times has been questionable at best. So I think there's a lot of blame to be passed around in the South Bronx.
Yeah, I mean, granted, they haven't made a World Series with the second highest or third highest payroll in Major League Baseball. For the last 14 years, they have not made a World Series. That is not exactly a recipe for success. So, the Mets have made the World Series since in that span. They didn't win, but they at least made it, and you can't win it if you're not in it. So, but I don't think it's a bad choice. I mean, I know that do I think that Stephen Cohen wanted to spend $10 million on Craig Counsell? That was probably going to be the cost of him leaving that Milwaukee-Chicago corridor. And now he gets to keep his family an hour and a half away in Milwaukee, his daughters and whatever.
Probably 2 hours in traffic, but okay, whatever.
Right, but he probably has, he'll be with the money he's making for the Cubs. He's probably going to have his nice condo in Chicago. His family gets to stay in Milwaukee. They get to stay in school and all that stuff.
I'm sorry, what's it, an hour flight from New York to Chicago?
Yeah, but would Stephen Cohen lend him his private plane?
He buy his own damn plane. Well, come on, it's ridiculous. The other thing is, I've never said this before in my life, and I'm going to say it today.
Uh-oh.
At least I have the Jets to fall back on. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's that.
Take that in, Dennis.
I'm just going to say, based on what I've seen on Twitter yesterday and today, and if you factor in a lifetime of Jets fandom, I feel like Jet fans are way too confident going into this game. This is the game where they lose 30-10 in bizarre fashion. Like this, there's too much confidence going around.
Yeah, but if there's one team that's more cursed than the Jets, it's the Chargers, especially over the last few years. I mean,
Cinco's rooting for the Jets tonight. I saw it on Twitter.
Great. I think their quarterback I think Herbert is really good, but their coach is an idiot. and he makes bad decisions. And they seem to grab defeat out of the jaws of victory all the time. So, if the Jets keep playing the way they play defensively and minimize the mistakes they have on offense, they have a chance. But I think the Chargers should be favored, but it's in New York, right? So that's why I think is it a pick 'em or like 1 point, something like that?
Jets are up 3, I think.
Okay, that's home.
Right.
That's home field advantage.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll see. I'll be checking in.
4 field goals tonight. I'm predicting that.
I'll be checking in between periods of the Leafs and Lightning. Okay, let's get started here. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, November the 6th, 2023.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. And we are joined by our good friend Dennis Gorman, who has been our guest on Off the Post many a time. And we'll be talking New York area hockey. But I want to start with the news coming out of Carolina today, a little concerning about Frederik Andersen. It was just revealed about 15, 20 minutes ago that he has a blood clotting issue. And that is the reason why they have brought in Yaroslav Halak, former Ranger backup Yaroslav Halak, on a free agent tryout. They haven't signed him yet, but it does sound like Andersen is going to be out for an undetermined amount of time. But they're they at least by the statement that Don Waddell put out, Russ, they seem confident that this is something that they can rectify, but it's still concerning.
I will say this. They never fully rectified it in Tomas Vokoun. Like, he came back. He wasn't exactly the same. I hope the technology is better so they can. I mean, I just watched Andersen live the other day, and he actually played well against the Flyers. But there's something about this goaltending position and Carolina that they always seem to have trouble, and there's always seems to be issues with it. I did enjoy, and I'm sure Dennis did too, all these positive notations towards Halak, why this is a great signing. And yeah, that may be the Halak of like 3 years ago. The Halak of now is a different guy.
Dennis, to Russ's point, though, it's like, there are certain teams that fail to address certain issues of their team, and they continue to not address it. Toronto, the Maple Leafs, it's been defense going back to Boria Salmi. With Carolina, it seems to be the goaltending. They have, I think, arguably the best defensive core in the league. Pesci's out right now, but 1 through 6, I think it's the best. Their forwards are really good, and their goaltending has been sort of substandard. And when they get injured, which they've done a couple times in the playoffs, it's cost them. So everybody thinks they're a Stanley Cup favorite until they rectify their goaltending. I don't think they are.
I think that's right. I thought over the offseason they would make a play for Connor Hellebuck or John Gibson, someone to solidify their goaltending, because everywhere else they're pretty stacked. But you go back to the playoffs, first round, it was 6 games against the Islanders, and it was a very close series that probably shouldn't have been as close as it was. Second round, they had more playoff experience than the Devils, so they were able to kind of lean on that. But then they get to the conference finals against Florida, who was riding a really hot goalie at that time, and they needed a guy, the kind of goalie to match Bobrovsky's save for save, and they just didn't have that. And they keep running it back with Antti Ranta and Freddie Andersen and hoping that this is the year that these guys will be able to get them over the hump. And when it doesn't happen, it's like, well, you keep rolling 7s in until you crap out, and you crap out in the playoffs. So eventually, I think the thinking has to change there.
Well, yeah, and Russ, I mean, like I was saying, and we'll talk about other teams that haven't addressed certain areas, like Edmonton. We'll talk about them in a minute. But the weird thing is, I looked at the statistical breakdown. First of all, Carolina, in spite of that defense being really good, 1 through 6, they've allowed a ton of goals. Their goals against has not been good. Maybe that's reflective.
I think that's a combination of the goaltending not being great and them, having a big time injury on the blue line. I think that's part of it.
But I believe I think Anderson is the only goaltender of the three that has a save percentage over 900.
Yeah.
Ronta's under 900, and Kochekov, who they called up, is 0-3 with like an 836 save percentage, and that's the guy who's supposed to be the heir apparent, and they apparently don't have enough confidence in him that if one of their goaltenders goes out, they can go to Kochekov. He's been around for a few years. You would think that he would
But
be
he's still
ready.
young, and they just don't trust him. Like, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, okay. So some interesting, just looking at the standings right now, I just want to go through this. Then start with the Rangers, because 8-2-1 leading the Metro. Had this phenomenal road trip, Dennis. They're getting great goaltending out of not only Shesterkin, but out of Jonathan Quick, who seems to have found the fountain of youth. And they're playing this way in spite of losing Adam Fox, in spite of losing Hedel. I mean, right now, everything is, the injuries are a concern, but right now, everything seems to be going pretty good for the Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, we're 1/10 of the way through the season, and they've allowed the third fewest goals in the NHL, 23. Which I think, it's certainly a credit to the players and Shesterkin, but I think a lot of the credit has to go to Peter Laviolette for implementing a defensive structure in a neutral and structure in the neutral zone. Like they are playing a trap, they're playing the 1-3-1. But they're forcing turnovers, and they have the kind of firepower to turn turnovers into goals. So, and which was, let's be honest, under Gerard Gallant, defensive structure, neutral zone structure was an issue. It didn't seem like it was there. And if you go look at the reporting following, breakup day after the first round series loss to Jersey, Ranger players went to Chris Drury and said, we need coaching. We need a structure. We need this. We need someone who's going to push us. And which to me is a pretty damning critique of Gerard Gallant, but they went out, they got Peter Laviolette, who wasn't at the time the flashy hire, but he might have been the right hire because he's coming in with a system and it's worked so far.
Yeah, they're getting more out of Miller than they did last year, so that's a plus. Schneider's looking pretty good. But I am concerned about the injuries because the longer Shesterkin stays out, we're going to kind of see what Jonathan Quick's made of now, like really. And that's that it could be great or it could be horrifying. Like, you don't really know. So it is good that they had that road trip the way they did.
Well, I know that they placed Fox on LTIR, but I didn't hear a description of how severe obviously he's going to be out for almost a month.
I think it's like minor knee surgery. If I guessed, that would be my guess.
Yeah. So, losing your best defenseman, but they do have enough depth with Trouba, with Miller, with Schneider that they can get through a span of that. And as long as Fox comes back 100%, but Shesterkin is the big concern. If he's out long term, you're getting great goaltending out of Quick right now, but he is closer to 40 than he is 20. So there's a limit at how much they can really go with him. Now, the other team in that division that's right behind.
I just wanted to say something first about the Rangers.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Did you, Dennis? I thought you were going to chime in on something.
Yeah, it sounds like with Shesterkin, it seems like it's just a little soreness. It's nothing. Okay. It doesn't seem like it's a very long term, but so I think they're probably erring on the side of caution. But yes, you're right. If he's out for any period of time, it changes the entire equation around the Rangers.
Right.
I do want to point out, because I wasn't sure of the age because I was really young, Jacques Plante was actually younger than Jonathan Quick is while playing for the Rangers. Just a fun fact.
Oh God, was that in '65? Was that?
It was a little later than that.
Yeah, it was before expansion because he went to the Blues. He came back out of retirement with the Blues and then played with the Leafs. Yeah, I remember. Well, I was 3 when that happened, but anyway. Okay. The Devils have been playing really well, but they had received a little bit of a scare when Jack Hughes slammed into the boards in that game. From all indications, Dennis, it doesn't sound like it's a severe injury, but it's something that's going to keep him out at least a few days, which, I mean, that's something that they may probably consider themselves lucky that they dodged a bullet, because the way Hughes was going, I mean, he's, I think, on in contention for the Hart the way he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, some of the reporting that just came out said he's week to week, but it's not anything that's going to keep him out
long term.
Long term. And yes, he started the season at a Hart Trophy pace, and you probably make the argument an Art Ross pace. He was putting up a ton of points, was the best player on the ice pretty much every night by a substantial margin. So yeah, and let's be honest, they're building the franchise around him, around Nico Hischier, around Jesper Bratt. But if you don't have that dynamic top line center who can create,
yeah,
it becomes tougher for the Devils.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're also building around Luke Hughes, because Luke Hughes is getting like more responsibility than Hamilton, even though Hamilton still has more points, one more point. But they're definitely doing that. I don't know if they're doing it too soon, but that's what they're doing. So it'll be interesting.
Well, I'll just say this, because when the Sabres played the Devils, and I was saying, I watched the game, and Luke Hughes is the quarterback of the top power play. And I'm like, you've got one of the best power play quarterbacks in the league in Dougie Hamilton, and you're using him on the second power play. And I'm talking to one of the reporters, and I says, what the hell is Lindy thinking? He said, they're tops in the league. They're 42% at that point. So if it works, it works. I mean, I grant the point. And the thing is that they're using Luke Hughes 5-on-5 with Brendan Smith, and they're using Hamilton with Siegenthaler. They would rather have Hamilton playing 5-on-5 minutes, and give the power play time to Hughes. And as long as their power play is working like it is, that makes a lot of sense. But
yeah, I think did I see it at 43%, something insane like that?
Yeah, I don't know what it is now, but when they played the Sabres,
it was in the 40s.
Yeah, it was in the 40s. So, Dennis, let's talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is the pathetic nature of the New York Islanders. Because as much as I love Sorokin, I think he's one of the top 2 or 3 goaltenders in the league, they're going to make the playoffs on the back of Sorokin, because again, what we were talking about Carolina and their goaltending, well, that goes with the Islanders and their offense, which means it's not non-existent, but it's just not good enough. And for them to have the aspirations that we think that they have, they just don't score enough.
No, they don't. And the last game they played Saturday against, and I'm blanking on it was Carolina Saturday.
Yeah.
Carolina out attempted them 100-34, I believe was the
wow.
And in the last 5 games, my friend Joe Pantorno of AM Metro was telling me Sorokin's faced 40 shots in each of his last 5 games. And just he's under siege, and the problem is with Lane Lambert, when he came in, the idea was he was going to keep Barry Trotz's defensive system in place, but open it up a little more offensively. The problem is, going back to last year, when they had that awful January when they were not scoring goals and they were losing games, he got to the point where he had to dial it back. Their willingness, their offensive attack, because their goaltending was under siege. So it's the same issue now. They haven't really fixed it in any meaningful way. I mean, they obviously believe in Bo Horvat, but he didn't practice today, and it's not known if he'll play tomorrow against the Wild. So at practice today, Matt Barzal slid to center, and Ollie Wahlstrom was on his right wing. And so, okay, but Lane Lambert said, look, I want him to use it. Said, when we asked him about it, I want him to use his shot. Wahlstrom said he wants to use his shot. But the problem is, when he gets those opportunities, I don't know if it's the case he hasn't grasped them, or if the coach doesn't have faith in him, because I know last time he was he was in the lineup for a couple of games. He was on the third line with J.G. Peugeot, and he immediately got dropped to the fourth line. And
he wasn't getting a lot of minutes.
Was not getting a lot of minutes, and it's hard, I think, if you're a guy who's touted as a goal scorer, a sniper, to all of a sudden put up numbers when your centers are J.G. Peugeot and Casey Cizikas, and you're getting 8 minutes a night. It's, you got to give the guy some kind of meaningful minutes.
I have some Islander stats. Sorry, Mike. So for goals for, they're 26th in the league, not a surprise. For power play, 22nd in the league, not a surprise. For assists, 27th in the league. Shooting percentage, 25th in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them play twice this year against the Sabres. They were lucky to win the game in New York. Cizikas scored a third period goal, and they got, Buffalo was the better of the two teams when they played here about a few days later. So, I mean, but the same problems. I mean, if you're expecting Pierre Engvall to score, and I like Pierre Engvall as a player, but if you're expecting him to score 20 goals, you're in deep trouble. I mean, I honestly think I'm surprised because they've used Horvat and Barzal on the same line. I'm surprised they're not using them separately because they need a 1-2 punch offensively at center, and I just don't think they're getting enough offense to, it's going to be hit or miss.
Dobson's their leading scorer, Mike.
Yeah, no, it's their offense is terrible. I mean, I keep saying it, and I think it's going to cost them. They may sneak in, but I don't think they're going to beat anybody in the first round
But wait, Zach Parise will get signed one of these weeks, right, Dennis?
That's spring chicken.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people thought, okay, that that Lambert and the Islanders coaching staff would split up Horvat and Barzal, but the problem is Brock Nelson's a center, and he's actually been their best offensive center in terms of goals, assists, points, and they really don't want to break up that second line with Engvall and Kyle Palmieri. And it's the benefit of having 5 pretty good centers and not nearly enough capable wingers.
Yeah, maybe, and again, I look at their salary structure and I think they have 6 or 7 players making $5 million or more, and not enough money devoted to their blue line, which, I think is okay, but it's not great. But really they need snipers and they don't have enough. So
one other thing for Dennis, Romanov has no points. Is that because of the role they're making him play? Because I get he can play physical, but he also can score if you actually let him, or at least create scoring chances.
Yeah, he's part of the shutdown pair with Ryan Pulak. So they're getting
now Ryan Pulak with a 98 to 99 mile an hour shot is a shutdown guy. Because look, when I saw him drafted, I said, he's got an elbow like Chris Pronger. I get it, but he's still a guy with tremendous offensive ability.
Yeah, and they've just kind of made them kind of the shutdown pair. Pellick is with Dobson, and at least in practice today, the third pair was Samuel Bolduc with Sebastian Aho, and
Mayfield's out.
Still out,
yeah.
Oh, he was. He played. Mayfield played the last game, and today he played against Carolina, and today Lambert said it was a maintenance day. So
okay. All right. Just want to touch around on a couple teams here. Russ, my favorite subject, the Edmonton Oilers.
Oh yeah.
I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. And
wait, you're going to do that after 10 games?
Yes. When you have 2 of the best players in the league in Draisaitl and McDavid, and you're 2-7-1, and you've given up 41 goals against, and your goaltending sucks, which I've said, I like Skinner, and if it's a choice between Skinner and Campbell, I'm going Skinner every day, including Sunday. But the problem is their defense isn't that good, and they're exposing these goaltenders. They're giving up lots of good chances. They're not getting good performances out of either one. McDavid was out for a week. That sort of started them down the downslope. Then he comes back and they can't score enough goals to win any games. I mean, I'm sorry. It's just like this is a flawed roster. And I don't know if it's coaching or if it's just a multi-system failure, Dennis, but I look at this team and I'm like, what a waste of talent, because there's some talent there, but just they've never put it together.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? Yeah, again, I think of them kind of in the same boat as Carolina. They've never really figured out their goaltending. They're a team to me that the plan is to outscore their mistakes. And that I think that works in the regular season, but it doesn't work in the playoffs, especially when you go deep in the playoffs and you start playing against teams that have good goaltending or have a structure. And right now, I mean, let's say they fired Jay Woodcroft, which could happen. Who is the coach that can come in right now, implement a structure that is good enough to get them back in the playoff mix in the West?
Well, there are going to be Oilers fans that will say Joel Quenneville, and then you're dealing with a whole new setup.
Yeah, that's not happening. Joel Quenneville's not happening. Mike Babcock's not happening. So forget
Babcock definitely not, but Quenneville could.
No, Ellie Friedman on their podcast today said now that there's this new investigation going on regarding a black ace on the 2010 team and allegations. Now that that's come up, there's probably no chance in hell that the NHL would give approval for Quenneville to take a job. So that's not going to happen. But okay,
Randy said Daryl Sutter.
Well, yeah, there you go. Alain Vigneault, Claude Julien. I mean, there are veteran coaches out there that could.
I'm telling you, there's still Patrick Waugh. I know he's being talked about in Ottawa, but he could get talked about in Edmonton too. I don't see why Edmonton would say, no, we can't have Patrick Waugh. I'm not telling you he's a good coach, but I'm just saying there is no question he will command some respect early on and change things. Now, whether it's going to be good or not, I can't tell you that, but I can tell you he's going to do that. I feel bad for Woodcroft because Woodcroft has been preaching defense, and honestly, both goaltenders have let him down. So it doesn't matter. It's like, because I've watched them, and there's a mental fragility that exists on that team where if they go down 2 goals or 3 goals, they feel like that's it, game's over, even with the offense they have.
Russ, a very quick question. If they hire Patrick Waugh, will he be a player coach? Because clearly he was a goaltender.
Well, I mean, I don't know how old Freddie is if he wants to bring in Freddie as a no, I'm kidding. Freddie who's had a good temper, though. Freddie Waugh.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. But no, the funny thing is that Patrick in his 50s is probably a better goalie than Jack Campbell is right now.
No, but, there is something to be said. Like, could he pass on some knowledge that, a great goalie could? At this point, they have to be desperate for anything because, again, it wasn't just me that said they could make it to the conference finals. There was a reason we all said that because Skinner looked good last year. So there's there's some hope there and all the other assets that they have on the team.
Yeah, and things looked like they were coming together a little bit in the sense that they traded for Ekholm, and with Ekholm and Bouchard and Nurse, you have a top half of your blue line, which is decent. The problem is the second half of the blue line is terrible, and defensively, it's not on just the defense. It's like with Toronto. It's got to be a 5-man defensive unit playing out there, and when you don't do that and you give up chances the other way and you have subpar goaltending, it's going to end up in the back of your net, and that's just reality. So I like, they may pull out of this, and with McDavid and Draisaitl, they put the team on their back and they'll start winning. They're just never going to win a Stanley Cup with this flawed roster, no matter what they do.
I just feel like they have to bring in a big personality. I feel like that may be the only thing that gets these guys attention. I don't know.
Ryan Reeves is available, Russ.
Ryan Reeves, listen, don't get me started, Mike. I told you it was a terrible sign-in. You were like, but they can bury it. And it's like, okay.
Right.
So why do you waste the money to begin with or the roster
It's not wasted. It's first of all, it's not my money, it's the Leafs' money. And second of all, it's not wasted because if it's a complete disaster, they can send him to the minors.
Then it's wasted.
Russ, it's not. I mean, okay, if he actually
they didn't pay him at all this year.
If he actually did the job that he was signed to do,
I mean, anybody could watch him for the last year and realize that was not going to happen.
Yeah, okay.
I told you. I think Brad Treliving hired him undercover, like basically to cover himself, to say, "All right, we have a tough guy now," not realizing that this guy's past it.
Well,
I really feel like that's what he did.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, then Bill Guerin was doing the same thing because he offered him a 2-year deal. But Dennis, I mean, you're aware of Reeves' act with the Rangers, and they promptly dispatched him to Minnesota when basically even Gerard Gallant, the guy who would normally play somebody who plays like Reeves, couldn't play him because he was such a liability. So far this year, as a fourth liner, he's been on the ice for 9 goals, 2 of them included in the game against Buffalo on Saturday, and on the ice for 0 goals. 4. So
it's not great. And look, you have a Ryan Reeves on your team to be the deterrent, right? Except, what did he deter against Boston? Brad Marchand wasn't afraid to take Timothy Liljegren into the boards, and I know that I know Reeves said, I wasn't able to get because Boston had last change. He wasn't able to get on the ice with Marchand at the same time. But in what universe is Brad Marchand ever going to drop the gloves with Ryan Reeves?
No,
he's not going to do that. He'll take the punch to the face. He'll take the punch to the face to get the power play. But he's not going to fight the guy. And
right.
So
he's not gonna fight him, but and maybe Brad Marchand is unintimidatable. Maybe that he's the exception to the rule. But most players out there, when Reeves is like doing his sort of Mau act and he's throwing his weight around, would give second thought to doing something relatively cheap, which I thought Marchand did with a can opener right along the boards, and Liljegren's probably out for about a month to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain, and the Leafs are in their situation with their defense. They could not afford to lose Liljegren on top of losing Timmins, on top of losing McCabe. So, it makes the Leafs look vulnerable, but my issue right now is greater than just that, just Reeves, because like I said, he's making $1.3 million, and if it's a bust, they can send him to the minors, and he's not going to retire. That's money in the bank. He'll go and play for the Marlies for 2 years. My problem right now with the Leafs is if your name is not Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, or Morgan Riley, so that's the core 5. The rest of the team, have scored 7 goals.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's bad. I mean, are we willing to admit, because I felt like this was happening in Detroit, that Tyler Bertuzzi is a bit overrated?
Well, I mean, okay, he was not overrated when he played for Detroit. He played well last year. He played great when he got traded to Boston. Right now, it just doesn't seem like he didn't fit with the Matthews line. Now they're putting Matthew Nyes on the top line. He didn't fit. So far, it's been an okay fit with Tavares and Nylander, but he's not really having the effect that, I mean, we consider Tyler Bertuzzi, a physical forward. He's not even doing that. He's not really hitting that much. So it's like, all the guys that they brought in, I mean, John Klingberg is John Klingberg. He's not good defensively, but he's a good offensive defenseman. Got a big shot from the point. He's got to play the power play. Max Domi, they're moving him to center. I think that's a mistake, but they're doing it because they're not getting any secondary offense. They're doing that tonight against Tampa. And Bertuzzi has had a tough time fitting in on any line, prompting one Toronto reporter to reference Nick Ritchie, Russ, which I said a couple weeks ago. I mean,
the only difference is Nick Ritchie was making $4 million less. Like that.
No, the difference was Nick Ritchie was signed to a 2-year deal and Bertuzzi was signed to a 1-year deal.
Yeah, but at $5.5 million for a cap strap team, he does need to come through. He's only averaging 2 shots on goal a game, Mike.
But but again, here is the issue.
Nobody told him to stop shooting, right?
No, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, what they're saying right now is, well, he's having a difficult time sort of understanding the concept of Toronto's offense. How about this? Go to the front of the net and Matthews or Tavares will get the friggin' puck to you. There's the concept.
Yeah.
You know, it's not tough. I mean, I'm not a hockey player, but you know, geez, these guys are creative and they get the puck to you. Go to the front of the net and they'll get the puck to you. But Dennis, my issue with this, again, this is along the lines of Carolina. The Maple Leafs, their problem over the last 3 or 4 years, well, going back probably most of this century, but going back to when they traded for Brian Leetch back in 2004.
Oh, please. You had to bring that up.
But Russ, he was good when they got him.
He was.
He was still a very good defenseman. And they don't have a problem doing that. Like, okay, Giordano for making $800,000 is a very good defenseman. He's not the defenseman he was 3 or 4 years ago, but he's being forced to play 20 minutes a night, and he's a former Norris Trophy winner. So they would take a couple more Mark Giordanos. The problem is they have invested, $12 million in Bertuzzi, Domi, and Klingberg. That money could have been invested in Matt Dumba or other defensemen, and they just don't do it. I don't get it.
Okay, but we all knew. I don't think anybody, you included, were a fan of Klingberg's play.
No, I was a fan of one thing: him being a point guy in the power play and having a big shot. And the thing is, the power play runs through Nylander and Matthews.
Yeah, so they go right to Matthews the minute the puck. I noticed that too.
Right. So it's like, I mean, yeah, his big shot is, if you actually let him use it, it would be good. But no, that's and if you're depending on him to play 20 minutes a night, his defensive inadequacies are always showing. But no, I look, Dennis, and from an outside perspective, because Russ and I talk about the Leafs every day, every week. They may make the playoffs.
Not by choice. I wanted to say it's not by choice.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I foisted upon you, Russ. They may make the playoffs. They may win a round, but this team will never win the Stanley Cup with Morgan Rielly being their number 1 defenseman. And Morgan Rielly's good, but he's a number 2 on a Stanley Cup winning roster. He's a number 1 on a team that can't win the Stanley Cup.
Morgan Rielly is to the 2023-2024 Toronto Maple Leafs what Ryan McDonough was to 2013-2014 New York Rangers.
Okay. Yep.
McDonough was a better defensive defenseman than Morgan Rielly, but they were both number 2 defensemen asked to be number 1s.
Right.
And as you said, looking at Carolina, and we can even extrapolate to Edmonton, they keep making the same mistake over and over again, not correcting it, hoping that this is the year that the problem finally solves itself. And I think eventually you have to figure out a way to solve the problem. And do you trade Tavares? Do you trade Nylander? Do you trade Marner? I mean, do you really, bite the bullet and try to move Matthews for for a lot? And I don't know what they do, but
something to point out too, if I have my year right. I covered that game 7 at the Garden, Dennis, and I'm sure you did too. If that was 2013-14,
no,
McDonough tried to skate around on the ice, or was it
2015?
14-15
for the next
when
year.
They lost to Tampa, yeah.
Right. So once McDonough couldn't skate, right, and he went in after. And I texted someone. I said this series is over, and so my basic thing is you can't have that much reliance on one guy on the blue line. It's never good.
Right, and McDonough is as proof of what he did with Tampa for the 2 years that they won. He was a great number 3 or number 2 on those cup-winning Lightning teams, but as a number 1, especially later in his career when he wasn't as good offensively as he was probably back when he played for the Rangers. I mean, he was decent offensively, not great offensively. But yeah, no, they cannot win They cannot win a Stanley Cup with the defense as it's currently constructed. And I wanted to talk about this before we end the show. One thing that Elliot Friedman brought up on the podcast that's been being talked about in regards to Edmonton, in regards to Toronto, and any team that's looking for defensemen is apparently Calgary, even though it's 11 games into the season since they're 3-7-1, they've shut down contract negotiations with Hanifin and Lindholm. They have 3 rental free agent defensemen in Tanev, Zadorov, and Hanifin, and there's talk about them shopping them. And Dennis, I don't know, any team that's looking for defensemen, I mean, you're not going to get a ton for Zadorov, but he's a decent probably 4 or 5. You're going to be calling Craig Conroy and saying, what do you want? And, there's going to be a lot of offers for those guys.
Yeah. Calgary, if you're Calgary, you're in a really good position right now because you can kind of start bidding wars on your defensemen, and maybe you don't get a ton back for one, but if you get enough back for the lot of them, you can maybe start a little bit of a rebuild. I mean, the biggest issue for them, I think, is whatever has gone on in that organization the last few years. They have to figure out what it is and kind of correct it. And I don't know.
Agree. I have breaking news. This will cause a spark. Tomorrow, I think they said either tonight or tomorrow. I just missed it. I think it's tomorrow because they have a doubleheader. Chris Chelios will be debuting on TNT.
Oh, he's left ESPN. Wow.
And we didn't love him on ESPN. Now on TNT, maybe he'll have a better chance to shine.
Yeah, when he's getting out personality by Mark Messier, something's wrong.
Yes, Chris Chelios is part of that team now.
Oh boy. Well, all I can say is Paul Bissonnette was on Hockey Night in Canada this Saturday. I didn't get a chance to listen to him because I was at the Sabres Leafs game, and they wouldn't turn the volume up so I could hear what he was saying. But it's sort of dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria, Russ. That was going on here. Like, it's what's next? What's next? Gretzky going to ESPN, so it'd be Gretzky.
I don't know. Ryan Callahan's there. Maybe Dan Girardi goes there. I don't know.
He's coaching with the Sabres.
I know.
Or maybe the Sharks win a game.
Wow. Flyers fans are worried about that tonight. Like they are. I understand. Like Drew Fawcett said that he was worried. I get it. I think the Flyers, if they were smart, would play a tight to the vest defensive game against San Jose, so you don't make the dumb error, so you could overcome the possible choke there. Because I do think there is a possibility for that. But I think there's a way to coach your way around it because the Sharks are eminently beatable.
Well, I don't know when the Sharks play the Leafs, but we know the Leafs penchant for losing to the lesser lights of the league. And I'm just looking here. They don't play them until, January. So hopefully they have a win by then.
I guarantee they'll have another win before January.
Dennis, thanks for joining, and we really appreciate it on short notice. We'll definitely have you again. Thank you very much. That's it for today. We'll be back on Wednesday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Dennis Gorman, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.